Somewhere beneath the deserts of Egypt, there are underground cities filled with ancient tombs and tunnels lost beneath the earth. Deep in the mountains of Armenia, abandoned fortresses still stand above cliffs where entire kingdoms disappeared into fog and silence, and hidden inside jungles, deserts, frozen wilderness, and remote valleys across the planet, archaeologists continue uncovering ruins so strange they still don't fully make sense today. Tonight we explore giant stone monasteries carved into mountains, mysterious standing stones older than the pyramids, lost cities swallowed by jungle, underground necropolises hidden beneath ancient civilizations. Some of these ruins were buried for thousands of years. Before we begin, comment your country and what time it is for you right now. I always love seeing where everybody's watching from around the world late at night. And if you're here before sleep tonight, comment Amen. Now turn the lights down, get comfortable. The giant stone chambers hidden in Saudi Arabia. Deep within the deserts of northern Saudi Arabia, surrounded by endless plains of rock, ancient trade routes, and burning silence, there stands one of the strangest prehistoric monuments ever discovered in the Middle East. Rows of giant standing stones rising from the desert floor, ancient stone chambers weathered by thousands of years of wind, and mysterious pillars placed so long ago that even archaeologists still debate who first built them. The place is known as Archaeological, and even today, it remains one of the most unexplained megalithic sites anywhere in Arabia, because this was not simply a collection of stones. It was a prehistoric monument built in the middle of one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. Al-Rajajil lies near the oasis town of Sakaka, surrounded by dry desert plains, rocky hills, and enormous open skies stretching endlessly across northern Saudi Arabia. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves across the stone beneath pale sunlight. Dust drifts endlessly through the empty desert, and rising silently from the earth itself, the standing stones appear almost unnatural against the barren landscape. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Tall stone pillars grouped together in rows and clusters, massive slabs weathered by centuries of sandstorms, and strange arrangements that almost resemble the ruins of some forgotten prehistoric sanctuary. The atmosphere surrounding the site feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads across the standing stones, while long shadows stretch across the empty desert floor. And because the monument stands isolated far from modern cities, the silence around it feels enormous. Historians believe Al-Rajajil may be more than 6,000 years old, making it one of the oldest known stone monument sites in the Arabian Peninsula. At the time, much of the surrounding region looked very different from today's harsh desert environment. Ancient Arabia once contained greener landscapes, seasonal lakes, and communities that lived across regions now consumed by sand and drought. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders somehow transported and raised giant sandstone pillars weighing several tons without modern machinery or metal equipment. Certain stones still stand upright, while others collapsed long ago beneath erosion and time. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking among them. The monument feels ceremonial rather than practical, intentional, organized, almost spiritual against the endless desert surrounding it. Researchers still debate the exact purpose of the site. Some believe the standing stones formed part of ancient burial rituals or ceremonial gatherings connected to prehistoric religion. Others suspect astronomical alignments may have influenced how the stones were arranged. Certain pillars appear positioned carefully in relation to sunlight and seasonal movement across the sky. The surrounding desert deepens everything emotionally. Dry plains stretch endlessly beneath enormous skies. Heat shimmers above the earth during daytime while freezing wind moves across the stones at night. And because northern Arabia already feels isolated and ancient, the monument almost appears frozen outside ordinary history itself. The stone chambers deepen the atmosphere further. Certain sections suggest smaller enclosed spaces once existed between standing pillars, perhaps connected to rituals, gatherings, or sacred ceremonial activity long forgotten by time. Standing among them feels strangely unsettling emotionally, as though the site once held importance for people whose beliefs vanished completely thousands of years ago. Researchers also believe Al-Rajajil reveals something important about prehistoric Arabia itself. Long before famous kingdoms, Islamic empires, and ancient trade cities rose across the peninsula, earlier cultures already lived, organised, and built monumental structures throughout the region. That realisation changed how archaeologists viewed Arabia's ancient past. The mystery surrounding the stones only grew larger afterward, because unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, very little written evidence survived explaining who built the monument or why it mattered. Only stone remained, wind, silence, and giant pillars standing alone in the desert for thousands of years. Then came gradual abandonment. Climate changed across Arabia. Regions became drier. Communities migrated toward water sources and trade routes, and slowly. The standing stone complex faded into isolation, while the desert reclaimed the surrounding landscape. Sand buried sections of the monument. Certain pillars collapsed beneath erosion. Yet parts of Al-Rajajil survived exactly where prehistoric builders raised them, long before recorded history fully began in the Arabian Peninsula. Some visitors later believed hidden tombs still existed beneath the desert surrounding the standing stones untouched for thousands of years. Others imagined forgotten astronomical knowledge may have guided the placement of the pillars beneath the ancient Arabian sky. And during quiet evenings, when desert wind moves between the standing stones and shadows spread slowly across the empty plains, Al-Rajajil barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The forgotten fortress above Armenia's volcanic mountains. High above the cold mountains of Armenia, surrounded by cliffs, storms, and endless volcanic landscapes, there are ruins of an ancient fortress standing alone against the sky, where kings, soldiers, and travellers once watched over the highlands below. Massive stone walls rising from the mountain itself, ancient towers overlooking deep valleys, and a forgotten fortress built so high above the earth that clouds sometimes drift directly through the ruins. The place is known as Ambud Fortress, and even today, it remains one of the most dramatic abandoned strongholds anywhere in the Caucasus. Because this was not simply a castle. It was a mountain fortress built to dominate the entire landscape around it. Ambud stands on the slopes of Mount Aragat, surrounded by steep valleys, volcanic plains, freezing rivers, and snow-covered peaks stretching across Armenia's highlands. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves across the cliffs beneath dark clouds. Mist drifts through the valleys below, and rising from the mountain itself, the stone fortress appears almost blended into the black volcanic rock surrounding it. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Gigantic defensive walls standing directly above sheer cliffs, ancient towers weathered by centuries of storms, and narrow mountain pathways leading toward a fortress isolated high above the world below. The atmosphere surrounding Ambud feels deeply strange, especially during bad weather. Clouds roll across the mountains while freezing wind echoes through the empty stone corridors. And because the fortress stands so high above the valleys, the ruins almost feel suspended between earth and sky itself. Historians believe Ambud became an important Armenian fortress during the medieval period, protecting routes across the highlands and serving as both military stronghold and noble residence. Its isolated location made the fortress extremely difficult to attack. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders somehow transported enormous stone blocks high into the mountains without modern roads or machinery. The walls follow the shape of the cliffs themselves, creating natural defences strengthened by massive towers and fortifications. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. The fortress feels cold, heavy, almost permanent against the volcanic landscape surrounding it. Researchers believe Ambud once contained royal halls, military barracks, storage chambers, baths and defensive systems hidden within the mountain fortress itself. The settlement functioned like a small protected world, isolated above the valleys below. The surrounding Armenian highlands deepen everything emotionally. Dark volcanic slopes stretch toward distant snow-covered peaks beneath changing skies. Storms move rapidly across the mountains, and because the fortress rises in such an exposed location, the wind never fully disappears. The church beside the fortress deepens the atmosphere further. Near the main stronghold stands an ancient Armenian church built from dark volcanic stone centuries ago. Its quiet presence beside the ruined fortress creates a strange emotional contrast. Faith and war standing together high above the mountains. The cliffs surrounding Ambud also reveal why the fortress survived for so long. Steep drops protected major sections, naturally making direct attacks incredibly dangerous. From the upper walls, guards could observe enormous distances across the valleys and approaches below. The isolation feels overwhelming emotionally, especially during fog. Clouds drift slowly through the fortress walls while parts of the ruins disappear completely into mist. For brief moments, the stronghold almost feels detached from the modern world entirely. Then came invasion and destruction. Empires crossed the Caucasus repeatedly. Mongol invasions swept through Armenia during the 13th century, bringing devastation across the region. Amberd eventually fell into decline while political power shifted elsewhere across the highlands. The fortress slowly emptied. Roofs collapsed beneath snow and weather. Stone chambers filled with silence. And over centuries, the mountain stronghold faded into ruins above the valleys below. Yet much of Amberd survived because of its isolated location high in the Armenian mountains. Even now, the giant walls still stand against the cliffs where medieval builders created one of the strongest fortresses in the Caucasus centuries ago. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels still existed beneath the fortress, leading deep into the mountains below. Others imagined royal treasures or ancient manuscripts remained sealed somewhere inside collapsed chambers, untouched for generations. And during quiet evenings, when storm clouds move across Mount Aragats and shadows spread through the ruined fortress walls, Amberd barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The lost stone city buried deep in the Sahara. Deep within the Sahara Desert, beyond endless dunes, burning rock plains, and some of the most isolated landscapes on Earth, there are ruins of a forgotten stone city slowly disappearing beneath sand and silence. Ancient homes abandoned in the middle of nowhere, collapsed towers rising from the desert floor, and a mysterious settlement so remote that even reaching it today remains incredibly difficult. The place is known as the Jardo Ruins, and even today, they remain one of the most haunting lost cities hidden within the Sahara. Because this was not simply a desert village, it was an entire civilization isolated at the edge of one of the harshest environments on Earth. The Jardo Ruins lie in northeastern Niger, surrounded by enormous sand seas, barren mountains, dry plateaus, and endless horizons stretching beneath the African sky. The environment feels unreal immediately. Hot wind moves across the dunes beneath blinding sunlight. Dust drifts endlessly through empty stone corridors, and rising silently from the desert itself, the abandoned city appears almost like a mirage against the Sahara landscape. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Rows of crumbling stone buildings standing alone among sand and rock, ancient walls partially buried beneath drifting dunes, and narrow alleyways leading through a settlement completely abandoned to the desert centuries ago. The atmosphere surrounding Jardo feels deeply unsettling, especially during evening. Golden sunlight spreads slowly across the ruined stone walls, while shadows fill the empty homes and towers beneath the desert sky. And because the city stands so isolated from the modern world, the silence there feels enormous. Historians believe Jardo once formed part of ancient Saharan trade networks connecting communities across North and Central Africa. At a time when caravans crossed enormous desert distances carrying salt, gold, goods, and knowledge, isolated settlements like Jardo became vital stopping points within the Sahara itself. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders created permanent stone structures in one of the driest environments on Earth. Homes, storage buildings, defensive walls, watchtowers overlooking empty desert plains stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. The city feels frozen emotionally, as though life simply stopped there one day and never fully returned. Researchers believe the settlement likely depended on underground water sources and oasis systems hidden within the desert landscape. Without water, survival there would have been impossible. That reality makes the existence of the city feel even stranger against the barren environment surrounding it today. The surrounding Sahara deepens everything emotionally. Massive dunes move slowly across the landscape beneath changing skies. Heat shimmers above the earth during daytime while freezing temperatures arrive after sunset. Storms of sand can erase tracks within minutes, and because the region remains so remote, the desert itself feels almost endless. The abandoned homes deepen the atmosphere further. Certain walls still stand several stories high, despite centuries of erosion and abandonment. Doorways lead into empty chambers filled with sand and silence. Narrow passages connect collapsed structures beneath drifting dunes. Standing inside them feels strangely haunting emotionally, as though traces of ordinary human life still linger beneath the desert wind. Researchers also believe changing climate and shifting trade routes likely contributed to the city's decline. As conditions grew harsher and caravan routes changed, isolated settlements across parts of the Sahara gradually lost their importance. Water sources weakened, trade disappeared, and slowly. Jado emptied while the desert reclaimed the stone city piece by piece. The isolation changes everything emotionally. Unlike famous ruins visited by thousands of tourists, Jado remains extremely difficult to reach even today. Long desert journeys cross some of the harshest terrain in Africa before the ruins finally appear among rock and sand. That remoteness preserved the atmosphere of the city almost perfectly. The mystery surrounding the ruins only grew larger afterward, because very little written history survives, explaining exactly who built Jado, how large the population became, or what daily life fully looked like within the desert city centuries ago. Only ruins remain, stone walls, empty towers, and silence beneath the Sahara sky. Some travellers later believed hidden chambers still existed beneath the dunes surrounding the city untouched for generations. Others imagined forgotten trade treasures remained buried beneath collapsed homes somewhere within the ruins. A few even believed additional lost settlements still wait hidden deeper within the Sahara beyond modern exploration entirely. And during quiet evenings, when desert wind moves through the abandoned stone streets and shadows spread slowly across the empty city, the ruins of Jado barely feel connected to the modern world at all. The ancient stone giants hidden in Indonesia's jungle valleys. Deep within the remote valleys of Indonesia, surrounded by rainforest, mountains, and thick jungle mist, there stand enormous ancient stone figures staring silently across the landscape for thousands of years. Massive human-like statues carved from giant blocks of stone, mysterious faces emerging from the earth itself, and strange monuments so isolated that even today many people still have no idea they exist. The place is known as the Beda Valley, and even now, its giant stone statues remain one of the most mysterious archaeological discoveries anywhere in Southeast Asia, because nobody fully knows who built them, or why they were left there. The Beda Valley lies within Sulawesi, surrounded by dense rainforest, steep mountains, rivers, and isolated valleys hidden deep within Indonesia's interior. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm mist drifts through the jungle beneath grey skies. Rain falls softly across the forest canopy, and scattered across the valley floor itself, giant stone figures rise silently from the grass and earth. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Huge carved statues with oversized heads and strange human features. Massive stone faces staring forward without expression, and ancient monuments standing completely alone among the jungle vegetation, as though abandoned by another civilization entirely. The atmosphere surrounding the statues feels deeply strange, especially during fog. Mist moves slowly between the stone figures, while jungle sounds echo through the valley beneath the mountains, and because the region remains so isolated, the monuments almost feel disconnected from ordinary history itself. Historians believe many of the statues may be over 1,000 years old, though their exact origins still remain uncertain. Unlike famous civilizations that left written records behind, the builders of the Beda Valley statues remain largely unknown. No surviving texts fully explain who created them or what purpose they originally served. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Some statues stand several feet tall, carved from enormous blocks of stone transported somehow across difficult mountain terrain without modern roads or machinery. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beside them. The figures feel watchful emotionally, silent, almost unsettling against the quiet valley landscape surrounding them. Researchers notice something unusual about the carvings themselves. Many statues possess exaggerated facial features including large eyes, oversized heads, and rigid expressions unlike most realistic human sculpture traditions. Some figures appear almost abstract, while others resemble ancient guardians frozen permanently within the jungle. The surrounding rainforest deepens everything emotionally. Dense jungle stretches across the mountains beneath endless mist. Rivers cut through hidden valleys far from major cities. And because Sulawesi contains enormous unexplored regions even today, the landscape itself already feels mysterious before the statues even appear. The isolation changes everything emotionally. Reaching certain parts of the valley remained difficult for generations because of mountains, forest, and limited access routes. That remoteness likely helped preserve the monuments, while much of the outside world forgot they existed entirely. Researchers believe the statues may have served ceremonial, spiritual, or funerary purposes connected to prehistoric communities once living throughout the valleys of Sulawesi. Certain figures stand near ancient burial sites or stone containers suggesting ritual significance tied to death and ancestors. The giant stone jars deepen the atmosphere further. Large carved stone containers known as kalamba remain scattered throughout parts of the valley beside the statues. Some researchers believe they were connected to burial practices or ceremonial activity, though many details still remain uncertain. Standing near them feels strangely unsettling emotionally, as though the valley once formed part of an ancient ritual landscape now completely forgotten by time. The mystery surrounding the statues only grew larger afterward, because unlike Egypt, Greece, or Rome, almost no detailed historical record survived explaining the civilization behind the monuments. Only stone remained hidden among the rainforest valleys, rain, mist, and giant silent faces staring across the jungle for centuries. Some visitors later imagined hidden ruins still existed deeper within Sulawesi's forests, untouched by modern archaeology. Others believed the statues represented ancient rulers, spirits, or forgotten gods connected to traditions that disappeared long ago. A few even suggested unknown prehistoric cultures once developed across the Indonesian islands, long before recorded Southeast Asian kingdoms emerged. Researchers reject the more extreme theories, yet they openly admit large parts of the Berde Valley's ancient history remain unresolved, because somewhere deep within Indonesia's mountain jungles, giant stone figures still stand silently in the mist, where an unknown civilization carved them centuries ago, and then vanished almost completely from history. The massive fortress walls hidden above Azerbaijan's empty mountains. High in the mountains of Azerbaijan, surrounded by cliffs, dry valleys, and endless winds sweeping across the Caucasus, there are ruins of an ancient fortress so isolated that it almost disappears into the rocky landscape itself. Gigantic defensive walls stretching across the mountain ridges, ancient towers overlooking enormous distances, and a forgotten stronghold built high above the world below where soldiers once guarded the frontier between empires. The place is known as Chirag Gala, and even today, it remains one of the most mysterious fortress ruins anywhere in the Caucasus Mountains. Because this was not simply a castle, it was a mountain fortress designed to watch the horizon itself. Chirag Gala stands high above the plains of northern Azerbaijan, surrounded by rocky hills, steep cliffs, dry grasslands, and distant mountain ranges beneath enormous skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves across the cliffs beneath pale clouds. Dust drifts through broken stone corridors, and rising from the mountain ridges themselves, the fortress ruins appear almost blended into the rock surrounding them. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Massive stone walls climbing directly along the cliffs, ancient watchtowers standing above deep valleys, and narrow defensive pathways leading toward a fortress hidden high in the mountains. The atmosphere surrounding Chirag Gala feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads slowly across the weathered stone while shadows move through the empty towers and ruined chambers beneath the mountain sky. And because the fortress stands so isolated from modern settlements, the silence around it feels enormous. Historians believe Chirag Gala became an important defensive fortress during the early medieval period, protecting northern routes through the Caucasus. The region stood between powerful empires for centuries, making mountain fortresses essential for survival and control. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders somehow transported huge stone blocks high into the mountains without modern roads or machinery. Defensive walls followed the natural ridges and cliffs, creating a fortress almost impossible to attack directly. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. The stronghold feels cold emotionally, watchful, almost permanent against the mountain landscape surrounding it. Researchers believe guards stationed there could observe enormous distances across the valleys and plains below, watching for invading armies, travellers, and movement through the frontier regions. The surrounding Caucasus deepens everything emotionally. Dry mountains stretch endlessly beneath shifting skies. Storm clouds gather rapidly above the cliffs while freezing wind moves through the ruined stone walls. And because the fortress rises at such high elevation, parts of the landscape below almost disappear into haze and distance. The towers deepen the atmosphere further. Ancient lookout points still stand above dangerous cliffs, where guards once monitored the surrounding territory centuries ago. Standing there feels strangely unsettling emotionally. The drop beneath the walls feels enormous, while endless mountains stretch toward the horizon. Researchers also believe signal fires may once have been used at the fortress, allowing warnings to spread quickly across distant defensive networks throughout the region. That possibility gave Chirag Gala its legendary atmosphere, a lonely fortress high above the mountains watching for danger across the frontier. The isolation changes everything emotionally. Unlike famous castles surrounded by cities and roads, Chirag Gala still feels remote, wild, almost abandoned by time itself. Wind moves constantly through the ruins while birds circle above the cliffs beneath enormous skies. The mountain pathways leading toward the fortress deepen the mystery even further. Steep rocky trails climb through dangerous terrain before the ruins finally emerge against the ridges above. That difficult access likely formed part of the fortress defense for centuries. Then came invasion, war, and decline. Empires shifted across the Caucasus repeatedly. Trade routes transformed. Political centres moved elsewhere, and gradually, the mountain fortress lost its strategic importance while the surrounding world changed below. Walls collapsed beneath weather and earthquakes. Towers fell into ruin. And slowly, Chirag Gala faded into silence high above the valleys of Azerbaijan. Yet much of the fortress survived because of its isolated mountain location. Even now, giant defensive walls still stand where ancient builders created one of the strongest frontier fortresses in the Caucasus centuries ago. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels still existed beneath the mountain ruins leading towards secret escape passages below the cliffs. Others imagined lost weapons, royal treasures, or forgotten military records remained sealed inside collapsed chambers, untouched for generations. And during quiet evenings, when cold wind moves through the ruined fortress walls and shadows spread slowly across the Caucasus mountains, Chirag Gala barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The giant stone fortress hidden in Ethiopia's ancient kingdom, high in the mountains of northern Ethiopia, surrounded by rocky hills, dry valleys, and the ruins of one of Africa's oldest civilizations, there are remains of a giant stone fortress that once stood at the heart of a forgotten empire. Massive walls rising above the landscape, ancient royal chambers buried beneath stone and earth, and mysterious ruins connected to legends so old they became woven into mythology itself. The place is known as Dunga, sometimes called the Palace of the Queen of Sheba, and even today, it remains one of the most mysterious ancient ruins anywhere in East Africa, because this was not simply a palace. It was part of a civilization that once rivaled the greatest kingdoms of the ancient world. Dunga stands near the ancient city of Axum, surrounded by highland plains, rocky terrain, distant mountains, and enormous skies stretching across northern Ethiopia. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm wind moves through dry grass beneath pale sunlight. Dust drifts across broken stone foundations, and rising quietly from the earth itself, the ruined fortress walls still mark the remains of a once powerful royal complex. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Massive stone foundations arranged in geometric patterns, ancient stairways leading toward collapsed chambers, and thick defensive walls suggesting a structure once designed to display both wealth and power across the highlands. The atmosphere surrounding Dunga feels deeply strange, especially during evening. Golden sunlight spreads slowly across the ancient stone while shadows fill the ruined rooms and corridors hidden within the fortress remains. And because the surrounding landscape already feels isolated from the modern world, the ruins almost seem frozen outside ordinary history itself. Historians believe Dunga formed part of the ancient kingdom of Axum, one of the greatest civilizations of the ancient African world. At its height, Axum controlled major trade routes connecting Africa, Arabia, India, and the Mediterranean. Merchants crossed enormous distances carrying ivory, gold, spices, textiles, and goods through the kingdom centuries before many European powers fully emerged. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders created large stone structures using carefully cut blocks and advanced architectural planning across the Ethiopian highlands. The ruins suggest multi-level construction, ceremonial areas, storage spaces, and elite residential chambers once existed within the complex. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Broken walls outline spaces where rulers, priests, and royal officials may once have lived. Ancient corridors lead toward collapsed rooms buried beneath earth and debris, and everywhere, the silence feels enormous. Researchers later connected Dunga to legends surrounding the Queen of Sheba, though direct historical evidence remains uncertain. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Queen of Sheba once ruled a powerful kingdom connected to Axum and later travelled to meet King Solomon in ancient Jerusalem. Over time, the ruined fortress became associated with those legendary stories. That connection transformed the site emotionally into something larger than ordinary archaeology. The surrounding Ethiopian highlands deepen everything emotionally. Dry mountains stretch beneath changing skies. Storm clouds move across the valleys during rainy season, while sunlight suddenly breaks across the stone ruins. And because Axum itself contains obelisks, tombs, and ancient monuments spread across the region, the entire landscape already feels filled with forgotten history. The fortress walls deepen the atmosphere further. Certain sections reveal surprisingly advanced stone construction, considering the age of the ruins. Large blocks remain fitted together despite centuries of erosion, weather, and collapse. The engineering still feels impressive emotionally. Researchers also believe the wider Axumite civilization possessed remarkable knowledge of trade, architecture, engineering, and international diplomacy during its height. The kingdom minted coins, constructed monumental architecture, and maintained global connections across ancient trade networks. Yet compared to Egypt, Greece, or Rome, far fewer people know its story today. Then came gradual decline, trade routes shifted, political power weakened, new kingdoms rose across the region, and eventually, parts of Axum faded while the fortress complex slowly collapsed beneath weather and time. Roofs disappeared, walls crumbled, stone chambers filled with silence and dust. Yet traces of the ancient stronghold survived where one of Africa's great civilizations once ruled the highlands centuries ago. Some visitors later believed hidden royal chambers still existed beneath the ruins untouched for generations. Others imagined sacred relics or lost treasures connected to the legends of Axum remained buried somewhere beneath the collapsed palace walls. And during quiet evenings, when wind moves slowly across the Ethiopian highlands and shadows spread through the ruined stone fortress, Dunga barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The lost stone tower, hidden along the Silk Road. Across the mountains of Kyrgyzstan, surrounded by wide grasslands, cold rivers, and ancient trade routes once travelled by caravans from distant empires, there stands a lonely stone tower rising from the ruins of a forgotten city. Ancient walls buried beneath the earth, collapsed structures hidden across the plains, and a mysterious tower that survived while the civilization around it disappeared centuries ago. The place is known as Brana Tower, and even today, it remains one of the strangest lost archaeological sites anywhere in Central Asia. Because this was not simply a tower, it was the last visible fragment of an entire city erased by time. Brana stands in the Chui Valley surrounded by mountains, open grasslands, and enormous skies stretching across northern Kyrgyzstan. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves through the plains beneath pale clouds. Horses move across distant fields, and rising silently above the landscape itself, the old brick tower appears almost isolated against the endless valley. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. A tall ancient minaret standing completely alone among scattered ruins and broken stone foundations. The tower feels disconnected from the modern world around it, as though something enormous once existed there, and then vanished completely. The atmosphere surrounding Barana feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads slowly across the weathered bricks, while shadows stretch across the empty plains surrounding the ruins. And because the valley feels so wide and open, the loneliness of the tower becomes overwhelming emotionally. Historians believe Barana once stood within the ancient city of Balasagun, an important settlement along the Silk Road during the medieval period. At its height, traders, travellers, scholars and merchants crossed the region carrying silk, spices, gold, knowledge and goods between east and west. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. The surviving tower originally stood much taller centuries ago before earthquakes damaged sections of the structure over time. Ancient builders created it from baked brick using advanced engineering techniques considering the era and environment. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beneath it. The tower feels watchful emotionally, silent, almost like the last survivor of a forgotten civilization buried beneath the valley itself. Researchers believe the surrounding ruins once included homes, defensive walls, markets, religious buildings and streets spreading across large sections of the plains around the tower. Today, however, much of the ancient city remains hidden beneath grass, earth and scattered stone. The surrounding mountains deepen everything emotionally. Snow-covered peaks rise in the distance beneath enormous skies. Storm clouds move across the valley, while cold wind sweeps endlessly through the open plains. And because Central Asia already feels tied to forgotten caravan routes and ancient kingdoms, the atmosphere surrounding Barana almost feels suspended outside ordinary history. The stone carvings near the tower deepen the mystery further. Ancient Balbal stones remain scattered across the site. Carved human figures created centuries ago by Turkic peoples across the Eurasian steppe. Some appear worn, almost beyond recognition, while others still show faint human features, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. Standing among them feels strangely haunting emotionally, as though the valley itself remembers civilizations long gone. Researchers also believe earthquakes played a major role in the destruction of Balasagun over time. Natural disasters damaged large sections of the city, while trade routes gradually shifted elsewhere across Central Asia. And slowly, the once important settlement faded while only fragments survived above ground. The isolation changes everything emotionally. Unlike giant famous ruins visited by massive crowds, Barana still feels quiet, remote, almost forgotten beside the mountains of Kyrgyzstan. Wind moves constantly through the valley, while the old tower rises silently above the grasslands exactly where ancient builders left it centuries ago. The Silk Road connection deepens the atmosphere even further. For generations, caravans carrying goods and ideas crossed these valleys, linking civilizations across Asia and beyond. Empires rose and collapsed along those routes. Cultures mixed across the mountains and plains. Yet eventually, the roads changed, and cities like Balasagun disappeared beneath history itself. Some visitors later believed hidden chambers still existed beneath the ruins surrounding the tower untouched for centuries. Others imagine lost manuscripts, treasures, or forgotten Silk Road artifacts remained buried beneath the valley floor somewhere within the ancient city. And during quiet evenings, when cold wind moves across the Kyrgyz plains and shadows spread slowly across the lonely stone tower, Barana barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The ancient megastructure buried beneath Syria's empty plains. Across the dry plains of western Syria, surrounded by ruined hills, ancient roads, and endless desert wind, there are remains of a colossal Roman city so enormous that even in ruins it still feels impossible to comprehend. Miles of giant stone columns stretching toward the horizon, massive gateways standing above empty streets, and an ancient megastructure so vast that parts of it can still be seen from the sky. The place is known as Apamea, and even today, it remains one of the most breathtaking lost cities anywhere in the Middle East. Because this was not simply a city. It was an enormous stone world built at the height of one of history's greatest empires. Apamea stood beside the Orontes River, surrounded by fertile plains, dry hills, distant mountains, and ancient caravan routes connecting Syria with the wider Mediterranean world. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm wind moves across broken stone beneath pale skies. Dust drifts endlessly through ruined streets, and rising from the earth itself, giant columns still stand where an entire civilization once flourished thousands of years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal, an enormous avenue lined with towering stone columns stretching across incredible distances, collapsed temples scattered beside ancient roads, and massive foundations buried beneath layers of earth and silence. The atmosphere surrounding Apamea feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads slowly across the endless stone ruins, while shadows move between the broken columns beneath the Syrian sky. And because the city once covered such enormous territory, the ruins almost feel like the remains of another world entirely. Historians believe Apamea became one of the major cities of the Seleucid and later Roman world after the empire of Alexander the Great fractured across the Middle East. At its height, the city grew into an enormous centre of trade, military power, philosophy and culture connected to major routes crossing ancient Syria. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Apamea once contained vast public spaces, marketplaces, temples, baths, theatres, villas, and monumental streets constructed with astonishing Roman engineering. The city's famous colonnaded avenue stretched for nearly 2 kilometres, lined with hundreds of giant stone columns. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. The avenue feels endless emotionally. Broken columns rise one after another toward the horizon, while scattered carvings and fallen stones cover the ancient streets beneath your feet. Even in destruction, the scale remains overwhelming. Researchers believe the city once held enormous wealth because of its strategic position along important trade networks connecting the Mediterranean with inland regions of Syria and beyond. Merchants, soldiers, travellers, and scholars likely crossed the city constantly during its height. The surrounding plains deepen everything emotionally. Dry grasslands stretch beneath enormous skies, while distant mountains fade into haze across the horizon. Storm clouds move slowly over the ruins during winter months, and because much of the surrounding landscape remains open and exposed, the ancient city feels isolated beneath the Syrian sky. The stone architecture deepens the atmosphere further. Massive carved blocks remain scattered across the ruins centuries after earthquakes, war and looting shattered large sections of the city. Ancient arches still stand above broken roads. Decorative carvings remain visible on weathered columns despite enormous damage across the site. The engineering still feels astonishing emotionally. Researchers also discovered evidence of multiple civilizations layered across the city over centuries. Greek influence, Roman expansion, Byzantine transformation. Different eras reshaped Apamea repeatedly, while the city continued surviving across generations. The megastructure evolved constantly, rather than remaining frozen in one period of history. Then came decline and destruction. Earthquakes damaged enormous sections of the city over time. Political instability spread across the region. Trade patterns shifted, and gradually, Apamea weakened while newer centres rose elsewhere throughout Syria. The giant streets slowly emptied. Buildings collapsed beneath. Disaster and abandonment, and over centuries, much of the once magnificent city became buried beneath dust, earth, and silence. Yet traces survived, endless rows of giant columns still standing above the plains, fragments of ancient roads stretching through empty fields, and one of the largest archaeological ruins in Syria remaining visible beneath the open sky. The tragedy surrounding Apamea deepened further during modern conflict. War and instability across Syria damaged and endangered parts of the ancient site, while looting and destruction threatened sections of the ruins that survived for nearly 2,000 years. That reality gave the city an even heavier emotional atmosphere, a civilization already destroyed once by time, facing destruction again in the modern world. Some visitors later believed hidden underground chambers still existed beneath the buried city untouched for centuries. Others imagined lost libraries, treasures, or forgotten records remained sealed beneath collapsed Roman buildings somewhere under the plains. And during quiet evenings, when desert wind moves through the endless rows of broken columns and shadows spread slowly across the ancient streets, Apamea barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The forgotten stone towers hidden along Scotland's northern coast. Far above the cold waters of northern Scotland, surrounded by crashing waves, endless wind and empty green fields, there are ruins of massive stone towers built by a civilization that vanished long before written history fully reached the islands. Gigantic circular walls rising from the earth, ancient underground chambers hidden beneath stone. and mysterious towers so advanced that archaeologists still debate exactly how prehistoric builders constructed them. The place is known as the Broch of Gurnis, and even today, it remains one of the strangest ancient ruins anywhere in Scotland. Because this was not simply a village, it was a fortified stone complex built at the edge of the North Atlantic itself. The Broch of Gurnis stands on the Orkney Islands, surrounded by rocky coastline, cold seas, grassy plains, and enormous northern skies stretching endlessly above the Atlantic. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves across the coastline beneath grey clouds, waves crash against dark rocks below the cliffs, and rising quietly from the green landscape itself, the giant circular tower ruins still stand where ancient builders placed them more than 2,000 years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Massive stone walls forming an enormous circular tower, ancient homes clustered around the central fortress, and narrow stone passages disappearing into chambers hidden deep inside the structure itself. The atmosphere surrounding the ruins feels deeply strange, especially during fog. Mist drifts slowly across the coastline while shadows fill the empty stone corridors beneath the northern sky. And because the Orkney Islands already feel isolated from the modern world, the Broch almost seems frozen outside ordinary history itself. Historians believe the Broch of Gurnis was built during Scotland's Iron Age by prehistoric communities living across the Northern Islands long before Roman influence reached the region fully. At the time, the Orkney Islands already contained ancient ceremonial sites, stone circles, tombs, and settlements stretching back thousands of years. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders created enormous dry stone towers using carefully stacked rock without mortar. The walls became incredibly thick with hidden stairways and internal chambers built directly inside the structure itself. The engineering still astonishes researchers today. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beside the tower. The Broch feels defensive emotionally, heavy, permanent against the harsh Atlantic landscape surrounding it. Researchers believe the tower likely served multiple purposes at once, part fortress, part home, part symbol of power within the surrounding settlement. Families lived in smaller stone buildings surrounding the central tower, protected by defensive walls and controlled entrances. The surrounding coastline deepens everything emotionally. Cold sea wind moves endlessly across the grasslands. Storm clouds roll in suddenly from the Atlantic, and during winter, enormous waves strike the rocky shores beneath freezing northern skies. The isolation feels overwhelming. The interior passages deepen the atmosphere further. Ancient stairways hidden inside the thick walls once allowed movement upward through the tower itself. Small stone chambers remain buried within the structure, connected through narrow openings and dark corridors. Standing inside them feels strangely claustrophobic emotionally. Cold air lingers between the stones while faint light enters from tiny openings facing the sea. Researchers still debate why Broch towers appeared across parts of ancient Scotland during the Iron Age. Some believe they functioned mainly as defensive fortresses during dangerous periods of conflict. Others think the towers symbolised wealth, authority and control within isolated island communities. Perhaps they served both purposes together. The mystery surrounding the structures only deepened afterward, because despite their incredible engineering, the people who built them left almost no written explanations behind. Only stone remained, wind, sea, and giant circular towers standing silently above the Atlantic coast. The Orkney Islands themselves deepen the atmosphere even more. The region contains some of the oldest archaeological sites in Europe, including stone villages, ceremonial complexes, burial tombs, and ancient monuments older than the pyramids. Human beings lived among these northern islands for thousands of years, shaping the landscape long before modern Scotland existed. Then came centuries of change. Climate shifted, cultures transformed, new kingdoms emerged across the British Isles, and gradually, the great stone tower of Gurnis fell silent, while wind and weather moved endlessly through the abandoned settlement beside the sea. Roofs disappeared, walls partially collapsed, grass covered the ancient pathways between the buildings. Yet much of the Broch survived, where Iron Age builders raised one of the strongest towers in prehistoric Scotland centuries ago. Some visitors later believed hidden underground chambers still existed beneath the ruins, untouched for generations. Others imagined forgotten rituals once took place inside the stone tower during violent Atlantic storms beneath the northern sky. the underground city of the dead hidden beneath Italy. Beneath the quiet hills of central Italy, surrounded by forests, ancient roads, and rolling countryside, there are thousands of underground tombs carved directly into volcanic stone, where an entire civilization buried its dead long before the rise of Rome. Ancient streets leading into the earth, massive burial chambers hidden beneath grassy hills, and a mysterious necropolis designed almost like a city built for the dead themselves. The place is known as the Etruscan necropolis of Cerveteri, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary underground archaeological sites anywhere in Europe. Because this was not simply a cemetery. It was an entire underground world hidden beneath the Italian landscape. Cerveteri lies northwest of Rome, surrounded by quiet countryside, forests, volcanic hills, and ancient pathways stretching across the region once controlled by the Etruscans. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm wind moves through dry grass beneath pale skies. Birds circle above the rolling hills, and hidden beneath the earth itself, enormous underground chambers spread silently beneath the landscape. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Large circular burial mounds rising from the ground, stone-cut roads leading between ancient tomb entrances, and underground chambers carved so carefully they almost resemble homes frozen beneath the earth forever. The atmosphere surrounding the necropolis feels deeply strange, especially during evening. Golden sunlight spreads slowly across the grassy mounds while shadows fill the ancient entrances descending underground into darkness. And because the site stretches across such a large area, the necropolis almost feels like an abandoned city hidden beneath the hills. Historians believe the necropolis was created by the Etruscans, one of the most advanced civilizations in ancient Italy, before Roman dominance reshaped the peninsula. At their height, the Etruscans built powerful cities, developed advanced engineering, traded across the Mediterranean, and influenced early Roman culture deeply. Yet much of their civilization still remains mysterious today. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Thousands of tombs were carved throughout the landscape over centuries, creating organized burial districts connected by roads and pathways, almost like ordinary neighborhoods. The emotional effect becomes powerful while descending underground. Stone stairways lead into cool, dark chambers beneath the earth. Ancient rooms branch outward from central spaces, and carved stone furniture still remains visible inside certain tombs, exactly where ancient families placed it thousands of years ago. Researchers believe many tombs were intentionally designed to resemble homes for the afterlife. Beds, chairs, doorways, and domestic spaces were carved directly into the stone, creating underground houses for the dead beneath the hills of Cerveteri. The surrounding Italian countryside deepens everything emotionally. Rolling hills stretch beneath changing skies, while forests move softly in the distance. Rain falls quietly across the ancient roads during storm season, and because much of the necropolis remains partially hidden beneath vegetation and earth, the underground city almost feels naturally buried by time itself. The burial chambers deepen the atmosphere further. Certain tombs contain painted walls, carved decorations, and family spaces where generations were buried together over long periods of time. Standing inside them feels strangely intimate emotionally, as though ordinary life was meant to continue beneath the earth after death itself. Researchers also discovered how advanced Etruscan engineering and urban planning became centuries before Rome reached its greatest power. The necropolis reflects organized architecture, ritual traditions, and social systems already highly developed long before the Roman Empire dominated Italy. Yet compared to Rome, far fewer people know the Etruscans today. That mystery only deepened over time. Because although the Etruscans influenced Roman religion, engineering, symbols, and culture heavily, much of their language and history gradually disappeared after Roman expansion absorbed their civilization completely. Only fragments survived, ruins, artifacts, and underground cities of the dead hidden beneath the Italian countryside. The volcanic stone surrounding Cerveteri also preserved the tombs remarkably well. Ancient chambers remained sealed beneath earth and grass for centuries, protecting carvings and structures hidden underground from weather above. Then came thousands of years of silence. Empires rose and collapsed across Europe, roads changed, kingdoms transformed Italy repeatedly, and gradually, The underground necropolis faded into the landscape while forests and hills covered the ancient tomb city beneath the earth. Yet traces survived: stone roads, burial mounds, and endless underground chambers where the Etruscans created one of the largest necropolises in the ancient world centuries before modern Italy existed. Some visitors later believed hidden passages still connected undiscovered tombs deep beneath the hills, untouched for generations. Others imagined lost treasures, royal burials, or forgotten Etruscan records remained sealed inside unexplored chambers somewhere below the countryside. And during quiet evenings, when wind moves across the grassy hills and shadows spread slowly through the underground tomb entrances, Cerveteri barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The lost underground city hidden beneath Egypt. Beneath the crowded streets of Alexandria, far below the noise of the modern city, there are ancient tunnels and burial chambers descending deep into the earth, where one of Egypt's strangest underground worlds remained hidden for centuries. Massive spiral staircases disappearing underground, ancient tombs carved into stone beneath the city, and mysterious catacombs so enormous that archaeologists still consider them among the greatest underground burial sites of the ancient world. The place is known as the Catacombs of el-Shokafa, and even today, they remain one of the most haunting underground ruins anywhere in Egypt. Because this was not simply a tomb, it was an entire underground city built for the dead beneath Alexandria itself. The catacombs lie beneath modern Alexandria, surrounded above by crowded streets, Mediterranean air, and layers of ancient history buried beneath the city. The environment changes immediately upon descent. Warm sunlight disappears, cold air rises from underground chambers, and deep beneath the surface, ancient corridors stretch silently through the stone beneath the earth. The first sight feels emotionally surreal, a giant spiral staircase descending into darkness. Massive underground halls carved directly into bedrock, and ancient burial chambers decorated with strange combinations of Egyptian, Greek and Roman imagery, blended together into something entirely unique. The atmosphere surrounding the catacombs feels deeply unsettling, especially in silence. Shadows move across carved stone walls while faint echoes travel through the underground passages beneath the city above, and because the chambers remain hidden so deep underground, the necropolis almost feels disconnected from the modern world entirely. Historians believe the catacombs were created during the Roman period of Alexandria, nearly 2,000 years ago when Egypt existed under Roman control while still preserving older Egyptian traditions. That mixture shaped everything inside the underground complex. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Researchers uncovered multiple underground levels connected through tunnels, staircases, burial chambers, ceremonial rooms, and hidden corridors descending deep beneath the earth. Some sections were later flooded by groundwater, making parts of the catacombs permanently inaccessible. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the chambers. Stone corridors open suddenly into enormous underground halls. Ancient niches line the walls where bodies were once placed. And carved reliefs combine Roman clothing, Greek artistic influence, and Egyptian gods together in ways almost nowhere else on Earth. The fusion feels surreal emotionally. Researchers believe wealthy families likely used the catacombs for generations, expanding the underground necropolis gradually over time. The site evolved into a vast burial complex hidden completely beneath the city above. The central burial chamber deepens the atmosphere further. Decorated pillars rise beneath carved ceilings, while statues and reliefs guard entrances leading deeper underground. Anubis appears wearing Roman military-style clothing. Egyptian symbolism mixes with Mediterranean artistic styles. The underground world feels culturally blended between civilizations. The surrounding city of Alexandria deepens everything emotionally. For centuries, Alexandria stood among the greatest cities of the ancient world. Libraries, philosophers, merchants, empires crossing the Mediterranean, and beneath all of it, hidden underground chambers silently expanded below the streets. The underground tunnels also add another layer of mystery. Certain passages appear unfinished. Others descend toward flooded lower levels still difficult to explore fully today. Researchers believe additional hidden sections may remain buried or inaccessible beneath the modern city. That possibility transformed el-Shokafa into one of Egypt's most mysterious underground archaeological sites. The darkness changes everything emotionally. unlike giant pyramids standing beneath open desert skies. These ruins trap visitors underground, surrounded by silence, stone, and shadow. The air feels colder, heavier, almost frozen beneath centuries of burial and memory. Then came centuries of abandonment. Empires collapsed, religions changed. Alexandria transformed repeatedly across history, and gradually, the underground necropolis faded from memory while the city above continued growing over it. The catacombs remained hidden beneath the earth for generations. According to legend, the site was rediscovered accidentally after a donkey reportedly fell through the ground, revealing the underground chambers below. Whether fully true or not, the story only deepened the mystery surrounding the catacombs afterward. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels still connected the necropolis to undiscovered chambers deeper beneath Alexandria untouched for centuries. Others imagined lost scrolls, treasures, or forgotten records from the ancient city remained sealed somewhere beyond the flooded passages underground. The giant archaeological city hidden along Albania's forgotten coast. Near the southern coastline of Albania, surrounded by forests, mountains, wetlands, and ancient waters connected to the Mediterranean Sea, there are ruins of a forgotten city where entire civilizations rose and disappeared across thousands of years. Massive stone theatres buried beneath trees, ancient temples collapsing beside abandoned roads, and enormous ruins hidden so deeply within the landscape that nature almost swallowed the city completely. The place is known as Butrint, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary lost archaeological sites anywhere in the Balkans. Because this was not simply one ancient city, it was many civilizations layered together in the same haunted landscape. Butrint stands near a lagoon close to the Ionian Sea, surrounded by dense greenery, rolling hills, marshlands, and distant mountains beneath enormous Mediterranean skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm wind moves through the trees beneath pale sunlight. Birds echo across the wetlands, and hidden among the forests themselves, giant stone ruins slowly emerge from the earth exactly where ancient civilizations built them thousands of years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Ancient walls covered in moss and vegetation, collapsed temples standing beneath trees, and massive stone pathways leading through ruins abandoned to nature for centuries. The atmosphere surrounding Butrint feels deeply strange, especially during evening. Golden sunlight moves through the forest canopy while shadows spread slowly across the ancient stone structures beneath the Albanian sky. And because much of the city remains surrounded by dense vegetation and wetlands, the ruins almost feel hidden from ordinary history itself. Historians believe Butrint was inhabited for thousands of years, becoming part of multiple civilizations across different eras. Greek settlers, Roman expansion, Byzantine influence, medieval occupation. Each civilization reshaped the city while building directly over what came before. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Butrint once contained theatres, temples, baths, fortifications, streets, marketplaces, churches, and defensive walls spread across a huge area near the coast. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Ancient stone roads disappear into forest shadows. Broken arches rise above overgrown pathways, and every section of the city feels connected to a different period of history layered together beneath the trees. Researchers believe Butrint became especially important because of its strategic coastal location, connected to Mediterranean trade routes crossing between Greece, the Balkans, and the wider Roman world. Ships likely moved constantly through nearby waters during the city's height. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. Forests stretch beside ancient wetlands beneath changing skies. Mist rises from the water during early morning, and because the ruins blend so naturally into the environment, the city almost feels reclaimed by nature itself. The ancient theatre deepens the atmosphere further. Stone seating still curves around the performance area centuries after actors, crowds, and ceremonies once filled the structure with sound. Today, silence replaces everything except birds and wind moving through the ruins. Standing there feels strangely haunting emotionally. The layers of civilization also deepen the mystery enormously. Greek temples stand near Roman structures. Christian basilicas rise beside earlier pagan foundations. Defensive walls from different centuries overlap throughout the site. The city became a living archaeological timeline preserved beneath the Albanian landscape. Researchers also connected Butrint to ancient legends linked to survivors of Troy according to later Roman traditions. That mythology added another layer of fascination surrounding the ruins over centuries. Whether true or symbolic, the stories transformed Butrint emotionally into something larger than ordinary archaeology. Then came decline. Trade routes shifted, empires weakened. Earthquakes, flooding, disease, and political change affected the coastal region repeatedly, and gradually, the once powerful city emptied while forests and wetlands slowly reclaimed the ruins. Stone buildings collapsed, beneath vegetation. Roads disappeared beneath earth and roots, and for generations, large parts of Butrint remained quiet and forgotten beneath the landscape. Yet traces survived. Massive walls hidden among trees, ancient gates overlooking the wetlands, and enormous ruins where multiple civilizations once ruled the same coastal city across thousands of years. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels still existed beneath the ruins leading toward undiscovered chambers below the ancient city. Others imagined lost artifacts, statues, or forgotten manuscripts remained buried beneath unexplored sections of Butrint, untouched for centuries. And during quiet evenings, when mist moves across the wetlands and shadows spread slowly through the overgrown stone ruins, Butrint barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The lost stone city hidden beneath Mali's ancient sands, across the dry floodplains of West Africa, surrounded by rivers, desert wind, and endless Sahel skies, there are ruins of an ancient city so old that it existed long before many of the world's famous empires had even begun. Buried streets hidden beneath the earth, ancient homes swallowed by centuries of dust, and a forgotten civilization that once thrived beside the Niger River before disappearing almost completely from history. The place is known as Gene, and even today, it remains one of the most important lost archaeological cities ever discovered in Africa. Because this was not simply an ancient village, it was one of the earliest urban civilizations in all of sub-Saharan Africa. Gene lies in modern-day Mali, surrounded by dry plains, seasonal wetlands, river channels, and enormous open skies stretching across West Africa. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves through tall grass beneath pale sunlight. Dust drifts across the dry earth during the long, dry season. And hidden beneath the landscape itself, ancient ruins remain buried beneath layers of soil and time. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Low mounds rising quietly from the ground. Fragments of ancient pottery scattered across the earth and buried beneath the surface. The remains of an enormous settlement once filled with life centuries before medieval kingdoms rose across the region. The atmosphere surrounding Gene feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads across the plains while long shadows move over the ancient burial mounds beneath the African sky, and because so much of the city remains underground, the ruins almost feel invisible despite their enormous historical importance. Historians believe Gene began developing more than 2,000 years ago near important waterways connected to the Niger River system. At a time when many outsiders wrongly assumed large urban civilizations did not yet exist in sub-Saharan Africa, people there were already building organized settlements, trade systems, and complex societies across the floodplains. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Researchers discovered evidence of dense neighborhoods, iron production, trade activity, farming, fishing, and long-distance exchange networks spreading far beyond the region itself. The emotional effect becomes powerful while imagining the lost city beneath the earth. Thousands of people once lived there, cooking, trading, building homes from mud brick and earth, raising families beside the rivers and wetlands long before colonial maps or modern borders existed. Researchers believe Gene became part of wider African trade systems connecting communities across the Sahara and West Africa centuries before later empires like Mali reached their greatest power. Goods moved across enormous distances through river routes and caravan networks linking cultures throughout the continent. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. Dry plains stretch endlessly beneath changing skies. Seasonal floods transform parts of the land during rainy periods. And because the Sahel exists between desert and fertile river systems, survival there always depended on understanding water, climate, and movement across difficult terrain. The buried city deepens the atmosphere further, unlike giant stone ruins rising dramatically above the ground. Much of Gene remained hidden beneath layers of earth for centuries. the city slowly disappeared into the landscape itself. That invisibility caused large parts of its history to remain unknown for generations. Researchers also discovered huge amounts of pottery fragments throughout the site, revealing centuries of continuous life and craftsmanship across the settlement. The sheer scale of material uncovered proved how large and organised the city once became. The mystery surrounding Gennaro only deepened afterward, because for a long time, many outside historians underestimated how advanced ancient West African civilizations truly were before outside influence reshaped the continent. The discovery of the city challenged those assumptions completely. It revealed that complex urban societies already existed deep within West Africa long before many people believed possible. Then gradually, the city declined. Trade routes changed. Political power shifted across the region. Environmental changes affected settlement patterns near the river systems. And slowly, Gennaro emptied, while newer centres developed elsewhere across Mali. Homes collapsed back into the earth. Streets disappeared beneath dust and grass. And over centuries, the once thriving city became little more than silent mounds across the plains. Yet traces survived beneath the ground. Pottery, buried walls, ancient tools and structures hidden beneath the soil where one of Africa's oldest cities once stood centuries before the modern world began. Some visitors later believed undiscovered sections of the city still remained buried beneath the surrounding plains untouched by archaeology. Others imagined forgotten knowledge, trade records or sacred objects from the lost civilization still waited beneath the earth somewhere within the ruins. And during quiet evenings, when hot wind moves across the dry fields and shadows spread slowly over the ancient mounds, Gennaro barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The massive stone city hidden deep in Belize's jungle. Deep within the rainforests of Belize, surrounded by thick jungle, endless mist, and the sounds of unseen animals moving through the trees, there are ruins of a massive ancient city hidden beneath the jungle canopy, where one of the Maya civilization's greatest powers once ruled. Gigantic stone pyramids rising above the forest, ancient roads disappearing into the jungle, and enormous ruins so vast that for centuries nature almost erased the city completely. The place is known as Caracol, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary lost cities ever discovered in Central America. Because this was not simply a Maya settlement, it was one of the largest cities the ancient Maya ever built. Caracol lies deep within Belize, surrounded by dense rainforest, rolling hills, rivers, and endless green jungle stretching beneath tropical skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm mist moves through the trees beneath grey clouds. Rain falls softly across the forest canopy, and hidden beneath layers of vegetation itself, giant stone structures slowly emerge from the jungle floor. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Massive pyramids rising above the rainforest, ancient plazas swallowed by trees and vines, and endless stone ruins stretching far deeper into the jungle than most people expect. The atmosphere surrounding Caracol feels deeply strange, especially during early morning. Fog drifts slowly through the temples while jungle sounds echo across the abandoned city beneath the rainforest canopy. And because the surrounding wilderness feels so enormous, the ruins almost seem disconnected from the modern world entirely. Historians believe Caracol became one of the most powerful Maya cities during the Classic period, controlling huge territories across parts of present-day Belize and neighbouring regions. At its height, tens of thousands of people likely lived there hidden within the rainforest centuries before Europeans reached the Americas. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Researchers discovered massive temples, palaces, reservoirs, terraces, ball courts, causeways, plazas, and residential districts spread across an astonishing area beneath the jungle. The city was far larger than early explorers ever imagined. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Ancient stairways climb toward pyramids towering above the forest. Stone plazas open suddenly between dense vegetation, and hidden structures continue appearing through the jungle as though the city never fully ends. Researchers also uncovered an enormous network of raised stone roads known as sac biob, connecting different sections of the city through the rainforest. Those roads reveal how highly organised Caracol truly became. The surrounding jungle deepens everything emotionally. Dense rainforest stretches endlessly beneath tropical skies. Monkeys move through the trees while birds echo across the canopy. Rainstorms arrive, suddenly transforming the ruins into dark green shadows beneath mist and water. And because much of the city remained hidden for centuries, the atmosphere still feels partially undiscovered even today. The giant pyramids deepen the mystery further. One structure known as Kayana rises high above the surrounding jungle, making it one of the tallest ancient buildings in Belize. Standing near it feels overwhelming emotionally. The temple dominates the rainforest itself. Researchers believe Caracol rivaled other major Maya powers across the region through warfare, trade, political alliances, and enormous population growth. Ancient inscriptions discovered throughout the city describe conflicts, rulers, victories, and relationships with other Maya kingdoms. The ruins reveal a civilization both advanced and highly organized, deep within the jungle world of ancient Central America. The reservoirs and agricultural systems also astonished archaeologists. Ancient Maya engineers transformed difficult rainforest terrain into a sustainable urban landscape capable of supporting huge populations through water management and terraced farming. That achievement still impresses researchers today. Then came decline. Like many major Maya cities, Caracol eventually weakened during the broader collapse affecting large sections of the Maya world. Political instability, warfare, environmental pressure, drought and social change likely contributed to the city's abandonment over time. And gradually, the rainforest reclaimed everything. Trees grew through plazas, roots split ancient stone walls, temples disappeared beneath vegetation and earth, and for centuries one of the largest Maya cities on earth remained hidden beneath jungle silence. Yet traces survived. Stone pyramids rising above the trees, ancient roads buried beneath forest growth, and endless ruins stretching through the rainforest where an entire civilization once flourished beneath the tropical sky. Some visitors later believed undiscovered temples still remained hidden, deep within the jungle surrounding Caracol, untouched by archaeology. Others imagined lost royal tombs, sacred artifacts, or forgotten Maya records remained sealed beneath collapsed pyramids somewhere beneath the rainforest. And during quiet evenings, when mist moves through the jungle canopy and shadows spread slowly across the ancient stone temples, Caracol barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The forgotten stone kingdom, hidden in Turkey's empty highlands. Across the highlands of western Turkey, surrounded by rolling hills, broken mountains, and endless open skies, there are ruins of a forgotten ancient city where giant temples, stone bridges, and underground chambers still stand centuries after an empire vanished. Massive marble structures rising above the earth, ancient streets disappearing into silence, and mysterious ruins so isolated that the entire city almost feels abandoned outside ordinary history itself. The place is known as Izanoi, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary hidden archaeological sites anywhere in Turkey. Because this was not simply another Roman settlement, it was an entire stone kingdom built deep within the Anatolian highlands. Izanoi lies in modern western Turkey, surrounded by valleys, rivers, dry plains, and distant mountains stretching beneath enormous skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves across the grasslands beneath pale clouds. Rain drifts slowly through the hills during winter, and rising quietly from the landscape itself, giant stone ruins still dominate the valley where ancient people once lived thousands of years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Enormous marble columns standing alone above the plains, ancient archways leading toward empty streets, and giant temple walls weathered by centuries of earthquakes, storms, and silence. The atmosphere surrounding Izanoi feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads slowly across the broken marble while shadows move through the ruined city beneath the Anatolian sky. And because the surrounding region remains quiet and lightly populated, the ruins almost seem disconnected from the modern world entirely. Historians believe Izanoi became an important city during the Roman period, though the region itself was inhabited long before Roman expansion reached Anatolia. At its height, the city contained temples, bathhouses, bridges, marketplaces, theatres, and ceremonial spaces connected to major trade routes across ancient Asia Minor. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders created gigantic stone structures using massive marble blocks transported and carved with astonishing precision centuries ago. Even today, portions of the city remain remarkably preserved despite enormous age and destruction. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Ancient roads stretch toward broken temples beneath enormous skies. Stone stairways climb toward collapsed ceremonial structures, and every section of the city feels frozen emotionally between greatness and abandonment. The Temple of Zeus deepens the atmosphere further. One of the largest surviving structures at Izanoi rises above the valley, on elevated ground surrounded by giant columns and massive stone foundations. The temple still dominates the landscape exactly where ancient builders placed it centuries ago. Standing beneath it feels overwhelming emotionally. The scale feels almost impossible against the quiet hills surrounding the ruins. Researchers believe the temple became one of the major religious centres in the region, during Roman rule attracting travellers, ceremonies, and political importance across Anatolia. Yet unlike more famous ruins elsewhere, Izanoi remained largely forgotten for generations. The underground chambers deepen the mystery even more. Beneath sections of the temple complex, hidden vaulted spaces and underground rooms remain carved into the foundations themselves. Cold air lingers beneath the stone while darkness fills the lower chambers beneath the ruins above. Standing there feels strangely unsettling emotionally, as though the city still hides parts of itself underground. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. Dry valleys stretch beneath shifting skies while rivers move quietly through the plains. Storm clouds gather across the highlands during winter, while wind echoes through the empty marble structures. And because the ruins stand isolated from crowded tourist centres, silence surrounds much of the city even today. Researchers also discovered one of the world's earliest known marketplace regulations carved directly into stone within the ruins. Ancient inscriptions recorded prices and trade controls connected to economic life inside the city centuries ago. That detail revealed how organised and sophisticated the settlement once became. The theatre and stadium complex deepens the atmosphere further. Large entertainment structures once stood side by side, where crowds gathered for performances, athletic competitions, and public events beneath the open Anatolian sky. Today, only silence fills the stone seating and ruined corridors. Then came gradual decline. Empires shifted. Trade routes weakened. Earthquakes damaged major sections of the city repeatedly. And slowly, Izanoi emptied while newer settlements rose elsewhere across the region. Marble collapsed into the earth. Columns shattered beneath weather and time, and for centuries. The forgotten stone city faded quietly into the Anatolian landscape, yet traces survived. Massive temple ruins, ancient bridges crossing the valley, and endless marble fragments scattered across the plains where an entire civilization once flourished beneath the skies of ancient Turkey. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels still existed beneath the ruins untouched for generations. Others imagined lost treasures, forgotten inscriptions, or sealed ceremonial chambers remained buried somewhere beneath the fallen marble structures. And during quiet evenings, when cold wind moves through the empty stone streets and shadows spread slowly across the giant ruins, Izanoi barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The massive stone monastery carved into the cliffs of Georgia, across the dry borderlands between Georgia and Azerbaijan, surrounded by empty hills, desert wind, and endless stone ridges, there is a giant monastery complex carved directly into the rock where monks once lived hidden inside the mountains themselves. Ancient cave chambers stretching through the cliffs, stone churches buried inside the hills, and a forgotten religious world carved into the wilderness centuries ago. The place is known as David Gareha, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary rock-cut monasteries anywhere on Earth. Because this was not simply a monastery, it was an entire civilization carved into stone. David Gareha lies within the semi-desert highlands of eastern Georgia, surrounded by dry valleys, rocky ridges, open plains, and enormous skies stretching endlessly across the Caucasus frontier. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves across the hills beneath pale sunlight. Dust drifts through narrow stone pathways, and carved directly into the cliffs themselves, hundreds of dark cave openings appear across the rock faces overlooking the empty landscape below. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Ancient chambers cut directly into vertical stone walls, long stairways climbing toward hidden cave churches, and entire sections of the mountain transformed into a giant monastic complex centuries ago. The atmosphere surrounding David Guerreja feels deeply strange, especially during evening. Golden sunlight spreads slowly across the rocky hills, while shadows fill the cave entrances hidden throughout the cliffs. And because the surrounding landscape feels so isolated, the monastery almost appears disconnected from the modern world entirely. Historians believe the monastery complex began forming during the 6th century when Christian monks settled within the harsh wilderness seeking isolation, prayer, and spiritual retreat far from major cities. Over generations, the complex expanded into hundreds of interconnected chambers carved directly into the stone hills. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders created living quarters, chapels, storage spaces, tunnels, stairways, and religious halls throughout the cliffs without modern tools or machinery. Entire communities survived within the rock itself. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the caves. Narrow passages lead toward hidden chambers overlooking endless valleys. Ancient stone steps disappear upward along dangerous cliffs, and cold air moves through underground rooms where monks once lived in silence centuries ago. The surrounding wilderness deepens everything emotionally. Dry hills stretch endlessly beneath changing skies. Storm clouds move slowly across the Caucasus plains, while wind echoes through the stone corridors carved into the mountains. And because the region feels so empty and remote, the monastery almost seems frozen outside ordinary time itself. The cave churches deepen the atmosphere further. Certain chambers still contain ancient frescoes painted directly onto the stone walls centuries ago. Faded saints, religious scenes, and medieval artwork remain visible inside dark underground chapels hidden within the cliffs. Standing inside them feels strangely haunting emotionally, as though traces of prayer still linger inside the rock itself. Researchers believe David Guerreja eventually became one of the most important religious centers in medieval Georgia, attracting monks, pilgrims, scholars, and travelers from across the region. Yet despite its spiritual importance, the monastery remained isolated deep within the harsh borderlands. The cliffs themselves formed natural protection. Certain cave systems sit high, above dangerous slopes reachable only through narrow paths carved directly into the rock. That isolation likely helped preserve parts of the monastery across centuries of invasion and conflict. Then came periods of destruction. Empires crossed the Caucasus repeatedly. Raids and invasions affected the monastery over generations. Some sections were abandoned, others collapsed beneath erosion and weather. Yet much of the stone complex survived because it was carved directly into the mountain itself. The silence there feels enormous emotionally, especially during fog. Mist drifts slowly across the ridges while cave openings disappear into shadow beneath the empty sky. For brief moments, the monastery almost feels like another world hidden inside the cliffs. Researchers also believe undiscovered chambers may still remain sealed within certain parts of the complex untouched for centuries. Some tunnels collapse naturally over time while other cave systems remain difficult to explore fully. That mystery only deepened the atmosphere surrounding David Guerreja afterward. Some visitors later imagined hidden manuscripts, sacred relics, or forgotten treasures remained buried somewhere inside the sealed cave chambers beneath the hills. Others believed ancient monks intentionally created secret passageways through the cliffs during dangerous periods of invasion. The ancient stone towers buried in Oman's empty desert. Across the rocky deserts of Oman, surrounded by dry mountains, endless plains, and ancient caravan routes lost beneath the sand, there stand mysterious stone towers older than the pyramids themselves, massive circular tombs rising from barren hills, ancient chambers built from perfectly stacked stone, and forgotten monuments left behind by civilizations that vanished thousands of years before written history fully began. The place is known as Bat, and even today, the ancient tomb towers of Oman remain some of the strangest prehistoric structures anywhere in the Arabian Peninsula. Because these were not ordinary graves, they were giant stone monuments built in the middle of the desert itself. The ruins of Bat lie near the foothills of northern Oman, surrounded by rocky valleys, dry riverbeds, mountain ridges, and enormous open skies stretching endlessly across the Arabian landscape. The environment feels ancient immediately. Hot wind moves across the stone beneath burning sunlight. Dust drifts endlessly across the empty plains, and scattered across the hills themselves. Circular stone towers rise silently from the earth, exactly where prehistoric builders placed them thousands of years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal, perfectly round stone tombs standing alone against the desert horizon. Massive walls built from carefully stacked rock, and ancient towers weathered by thousands of years of heat, wind, and silence. The atmosphere surrounding Bat feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads slowly across the stone towers, while long shadows stretch across the empty desert beneath the Arabian sky. And because the region feels so isolated from modern cities, the silence around the ruins feels enormous. Historians believe the tombs of Bat were constructed more than 4,000 years ago, during the Bronze Age, when ancient trade networks connected Arabia with Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley civilization. At the time, early communities across Oman already participated in long-distance trade involving copper, stone, pottery, and precious goods crossing the ancient world. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders somehow transported and positioned heavy stone blocks without modern tools or machinery, creating circular tomb towers that survive for millennia against the harsh desert environment. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking among them. The towers feel ceremonial emotionally, permanent, almost unnatural against the empty rocky plain surrounding them. Researchers believe many structures served as communal tombs, where multiple individuals were buried inside stone chambers hidden within the circular towers. Certain tombs contain interior compartments divided carefully with stone walls beneath the outer structure itself. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. Dry mountains rise beneath pale skies while heat shimmers above the desert floor. Storms of dust move slowly across the plains during strong winds, and because the ruins stand so exposed against the wilderness, they almost feel frozen outside ordinary history entirely. The circular design deepens the atmosphere further. Unlike pyramids or rectangular tombs seen elsewhere, the structures at Bat appear rounded and tower-like, with carefully balanced stone construction still visible despite enormous age. The engineering remains surprisingly advanced considering the era. Researchers also discovered evidence of settlements, irrigation systems, and trade activity surrounding the tomb complexes, revealing that ancient Oman supported organized communities far earlier than many people realize today. The region once connected important routes across the Arabian Peninsula, linking civilizations through trade and movement across difficult desert terrain. The mystery surrounding the towers only deepened afterward, because unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, relatively little written history survived explaining the beliefs, rituals, or daily lives of the people who built them. Only stone remained, desert, silence, and giant circular tombs standing alone beneath the Arabian sky. Then came thousands of years of change. Climate shifted, trade routes evolved, empires rose across Arabia, and gradually, the ancient burial towers faded into the landscape while sand and rock reclaimed the surrounding settlements. Certain tombs collapsed beneath erosion. Others survived almost perfectly preserved where prehistoric builders first raised them thousands of years earlier. Even now, the ruins of Bat still feel strangely untouched emotionally, especially during early morning when cold desert wind moves across the empty plains before sunrise. Researchers continue studying the site, trying to understand the civilization that built one of the oldest monumental landscapes in the Arabian Peninsula. Some visitors later believed hidden chambers still existed beneath unexplored tombs, untouched for generations. The ancient stone giants hidden in Russia's frozen wilderness, deep within the remote wilderness of northern Russia, surrounded by endless forests, freezing winds, and mountains buried beneath snow for much of the year. There stand gigantic stone pillars rising above the earth like something from another world, massive rock monoliths towering toward the sky, ancient stone giants shaped by time and isolation, and mysterious formations so strange that local legends once claimed they were living beings turned to stone. The place is known as Manpupuna, and even today, the giant stone pillars remain one of the most surreal natural wonders anywhere in Russia, because from a distance, they barely look natural at all. The Manpupuna rock formations stand deep within the Ural Mountains, surrounded by taiga forest, frozen rivers, tundra, and enormous empty landscapes stretching across northern Russia. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves endlessly across the mountains beneath grey skies. Mist drifts slowly through the valleys, and rising alone above the high plateau itself, The giant stone pillars appear silently against the horizon. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. 7 enormous rock monoliths standing upright across the mountain ridge, some towering over 100 feet tall. Others shaped almost like giant human figures frozen permanently within the wilderness. The atmosphere surrounding Manpupuner feels deeply strange, especially during winter. Snowstorms move across the plateau while the stone pillars emerge through fog and ice beneath the northern sky. And because the region remains so isolated from civilization, the formations almost feel disconnected from the modern world entirely. The emotional effect becomes powerful immediately. The pillars do not resemble ordinary mountains. They stand separately from one another, tall, narrow, almost watchful against the empty landscape surrounding them. Local legends deepen the mystery long before modern geology offered explanations. According to stories passed down by indigenous Mansi people, the stone giants were once enormous beings or shamans transformed into rock after entering the sacred mountains. Different versions of the legend survive for generations across the northern wilderness. The scale deepens the atmosphere enormously. The stone pillars rise above one of the harshest environments in Europe, where freezing temperatures, violent storms and deep snow dominate much of the year. Reaching the formations even today often requires difficult travel across remote wilderness, far from major settlements. Researchers explain the formations through millions of years of erosion and geological change. Ancient mountains once covered the region completely. Over enormous periods of time, softer rock slowly eroded away, while harder stone remained standing, creating the giant pillars visible today. Yet emotionally, the formations still feel unnatural, especially during fog. The surrounding wilderness deepens everything emotionally. Dense forests stretch endlessly beneath the mountains. Frozen rivers cut through isolated valleys. And because large parts of the northern Urals remain sparsely populated, silence dominates the landscape completely. Standing near the pillars feels overwhelming emotionally. The wind echoes around the stone giants, while clouds move rapidly above the plateau. And because the formations stand so isolated against the horizon, they almost resemble ancient monuments placed deliberately within the wilderness. The shapes deepen the mystery further. Certain pillars appear rounded and smooth, while others rise in strange, distorted forms shaped by weather and erosion over countless centuries. From some angles, they almost resemble enormous carved statues rather than natural stone. That appearance transformed Manpupuner into one of Russia's most mysterious landscapes. The remoteness changes everything emotionally. Unlike famous tourist sites surrounded by cities and roads, the stone giants stand deep within protected wilderness far from ordinary civilization. Snow, forest, mountain wind, and giant pillars rising silently above the earth. Researchers also believe the region held spiritual significance for indigenous communities long before modern exploration reached the northern Urals. The mountains surrounding Manpupuner were often considered sacred and dangerous places connected to myth, ritual, and ancestral stories passed through generations. That spiritual atmosphere still lingers emotionally around the formations today. Then came centuries of isolation. Storms crossed the plateau endlessly. Winters buried the mountains beneath ice and snow. Empires rose and collapsed far beyond the wilderness. Yet the giant stone pillars remained standing exactly where nature shaped them, long before modern Russia even existed. Some visitors later believed hidden caves or ancient ritual sites still existed somewhere within the surrounding mountains untouched for generations. Others imagined forgotten civilizations once viewed the stone giants as sacred monuments connected to the sky and wilderness itself. The ancient fortress lost high in Armenia's forgotten mountains, high within the cold highlands of northern Armenia, surrounded by deep canyons, forests, and endless mountain fog. There are ruins of a massive medieval fortress standing silently above the valleys where entire kingdoms once fought for survival. Gigantic stone walls stretching along the cliffs, ancient towers overlooking dangerous mountain passes, and a forgotten stronghold so isolated that clouds still drift directly through the ruins today. The place is known as Lori Fortress, and even now, it remains one of the most haunting abandoned fortresses anywhere in the Caucasus. Because this was not simply a castle. It was once the heart of an entire medieval kingdom hidden high in Armenia's mountains. Lori Fortress stands above the deep canyon surrounded by forests, rocky cliffs, freezing rivers, and endless green highlands stretching beneath enormous skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves through the mountains beneath grey clouds. Mist drifts slowly across the cliffs, and rising from the edge of the canyon itself, the stone fortress appears almost merged into the landscape surrounding it. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Massive defensive walls running along the cliffs, broken towers standing above deep valleys, and ancient stone gateways leading toward ruins hidden high above the world below. The atmosphere surrounding Lorry feels deeply strange, especially during fog. Clouds move directly through the ruined fortress, while shadows spread across the empty stone corridors beneath the mountain sky. And because the surrounding highlands remain quiet and isolated, the stronghold almost feels disconnected from the modern world entirely. Historians believe Lori Fortress became one of medieval Armenia's most important defensive centres during the Kingdom of Lori centuries ago. At its height, the fortress protected trade routes, royal courts, churches, and entire communities hidden within the mountains. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders somehow transported huge stone blocks across dangerous mountain terrain without modern machinery, creating enormous defensive walls capable of resisting invasion for generations. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. The fortress feels defensive emotionally, watchful, almost permanent against the cliffs surrounding it. Researchers believe the fortress once contained royal residences, military barracks, chapels, storage chambers, and hidden pathways spread throughout the mountaintop stronghold. Entire sections of the city existed safely protected behind the giant walls. The surrounding canyon deepens everything emotionally. Dense forests cover the mountainsides beneath shifting skies. Storms move rapidly through the valleys, while freezing rivers cut through the canyon floor far below. And because the fortress rises so high above the landscape, the silence there feels enormous. The stone churches deepen the atmosphere further. Scattered throughout the ruins stand remains of medieval Armenian religious structures, built from dark volcanic stone centuries ago. Certain carved details still survive despite earthquakes, invasions, and weather slowly damaging the fortress over time. Standing among them feels strangely haunting emotionally, as though traces of the kingdom still linger within the mountain air itself. Researchers also discovered underground chambers and hidden storage areas beneath sections of the fortress, suggesting the city was designed carefully for long periods of defense during siege warfare. The cliffs themselves formed natural protection on multiple sides, making direct attack extremely difficult. The isolation changes everything emotionally, especially during winter. Snow covers the ruined walls while fog fills the canyon beneath the fortress. For brief moments, the stronghold almost disappears completely into cloud and silence. Then came centuries of conflict. Empires crossed the Caucasus repeatedly. Mongol invasions, regional wars, earthquakes, and political collapse gradually weakened the kingdom and its mountain fortress. The city slowly emptied. Roofs collapsed beneath snow and time. Stone towers crumbled along the cliffs. And eventually, Lori faded into ruins above the forests of northern Armenia. Yet much of the fortress survived because of its isolated mountain location. Even now, giant walls still stand above the canyon where medieval builders created one of the strongest fortresses in Armenia centuries ago. The mystery surrounding Lori only deepened afterward, because unlike larger famous castles elsewhere, the ruins remain quiet, remote, and partially forgotten beneath the mountain fog. Some visitors later believed hidden tunnels still existed beneath the fortress, leading towards secret escape routes through the cliffs below. Others imagined royal treasures, manuscripts, or sacred relics remained sealed somewhere inside collapsed chambers untouched for generations. A giant temple ruins hidden beneath Bangladesh's endless plains. Across the green plains of northern Bangladesh, surrounded by rivers, rice fields, and mist-covered countryside, there are ruins of a colossal ancient temple complex built by a civilization that flourished centuries before the modern world existed. Massive brick foundations stretching across the earth, ancient monasteries hidden beneath grass and silence, and a forgotten religious city so enormous that even in ruins it still dominates the landscape around it. The place is known as Paharpur, and even today, it remains one of the most extraordinary archaeological ruins anywhere in South Asia. Because this was not simply a temple, it was an entire sacred city built at the centre of an ancient kingdom. Pahapur lies within the flat plains of Bangladesh, surrounded by farmland, rivers, distant villages, and enormous open skies stretching across the countryside. The environment feels ancient immediately. Warm wind moves across the grass beneath pale sunlight. Mist drifts through the fields during early morning, and rising quietly from the earth itself, the giant ruins spread across the landscape where monks, pilgrims, and scholars once gathered centuries ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Enormous brick walls forming giant geometric patterns, ancient monastery chambers stretching around a massive central structure, and ruined stairways leading toward the remains of what was once one of the largest Buddhist monasteries in the ancient world. The atmosphere surrounding Pahapur feels deeply strange, especially during sunset. Golden light spreads slowly across the weathered brick ruins while shadows fill the empty chambers beneath the Bengal sky, and because the surrounding plains remain calm and open, the ruins almost feel disconnected from ordinary time itself. Historians believe Pahapur flourished during the Pala Empire more than 1,000 years ago, when powerful Buddhist kingdoms ruled large parts of eastern India and present-day Bangladesh. At its height, the monastery became a major religious and intellectual centre, attracting monks and travellers from across Asia. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Ancient builders created a gigantic square monastery complex containing hundreds of monk cells, ceremonial spaces, courtyards, temples, stairways, and a massive central shrine rising above the surrounding plains. The emotional effect becomes powerful while walking through the ruins. Long brick corridors stretch toward empty chambers, broken stairways climb toward collapsed terraces, and everywhere, the silence feels enormous emotionally. Researchers believe thousands of monks and students may once have lived, studied, and worshipped inside the complex during its height. The monastery functioned not only as a religious centre, but also as a place of education, philosophy, and cultural exchange connected to wider Buddhist networks across Asia. The surrounding countryside deepens everything emotionally. Green fields stretch endlessly beneath changing skies. Heavy rain moves across the plains during monsoon season, while fog settles over the ruins at dawn. And because the landscape appears so peaceful today, it feels difficult imagining such a massive sacred city once standing there centuries ago. The central temple deepens the atmosphere further. Although heavily damaged by time, the enormous structure still rises above the surrounding monastery ruins, revealing how gigantic the original monument once became. The layered terraces and foundations suggest a towering religious complex visible across great distances. Standing beside it feels overwhelming emotionally. Researchers also discovered detailed terracotta carvings and decorative artwork throughout the ruins, revealing influences from Buddhist, Hindu, and regional artistic traditions blended together across the ancient complex. The craftsmanship still feels astonishing considering the age of the site. The mystery surrounding Pahapur only deepened afterward, because despite its enormous importance during the medieval period, the sacred city eventually faded from history, while newer kingdoms and religions transformed the region over centuries. Trade routes shifted, political power changed, and gradually the monastery emptied while vegetation and earth slowly buried the ruins beneath the plains. Walls collapsed beneath. Rain and erosion. Structures disappeared beneath soil and grass, and for generations much of the ancient complex remained hidden quietly beneath the Bangladeshi countryside. Yet traces survived: giant brick foundations, ancient ceremonial courtyards, and endless monastery chambers where one of Asia's great Buddhist centres once flourished beneath the open sky. Some visitors later believed hidden underground passages still existed beneath unexplored sections of the ruins untouched for centuries. Others imagined lost manuscripts, sacred relics, or ancient Buddhist treasures remained buried somewhere beneath the collapsed temple structures. And during quiet evenings, when mist moves slowly across the empty brick ruins and shadows spread through the ancient monastery corridors, Pahapur barely feels connected to the modern world at all. The ancient stone structures hidden along France's stormy coast, along the western coast of France, surrounded by cold Atlantic wind, crashing waves, and endless grey skies. There are gigantic stone monuments older than the pyramids themselves scattered across the landscape like fragments of another world. Massive standing stones towering above the earth, ancient burial chambers hidden beneath grassy hills, and mysterious megalithic structures so enormous that archaeologists still debate how prehistoric people moved them at all. The place is known as Lochmariacher, and even today, it remains one of the strangest prehistoric landscapes anywhere in Europe, because this was not simply a collection of stones. It was a sacred world built thousands of years before recorded history began. Lochmariacher lies in Brittany along the rugged Atlantic coastline, surrounded by rocky shores, green fields, forests, and cold ocean wind sweeping across northwestern France. The environment feels ancient immediately. Sea mist drifts across the hills beneath grey clouds, waves crash against distant cliffs, and rising silently from the earth itself, giant stones still stand where prehistoric builders placed them more than 6,000 years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Enormous standing monoliths towering over the countryside, ancient stone tombs buried beneath grassy mounds, and gigantic broken slabs scattered across the landscape like the remains of something impossibly old. The atmosphere surrounding the site feels deeply strange, especially during fog. Mist moves slowly between the stones while shadows stretch across the empty fields beneath the Atlantic sky. And because Brittany already feels isolated and weathered by history, the monuments almost seem disconnected from ordinary time itself. Historians believe the megaliths of Lochmariacher were constructed during the Neolithic period, thousands of years before ancient Greece, Rome, or even the Egyptian pyramids fully emerged. At the time, prehistoric communities across Western Europe were already building monumental stone structures on astonishing scales. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. One fallen stone known as the Grand Menhir Brisé originally stood more than 60 feet tall and weighed hundreds of tons before collapsing sometime in the distant past. Even today, researchers still struggle to understand exactly how ancient people transported and raised such an enormous stone without metal machinery or advanced technology. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beside it. The broken monolith feels overwhelming emotionally, almost unnatural against the quiet coastal landscape surrounding it. Researchers believe thousands of people may have worked together to move and position the giant stones using primitive engineering methods, ropes, wooden sleds, and incredible human coordination. Yet seeing the scale in person still feels difficult to comprehend. The surrounding coastline deepens everything emotionally. Cold Atlantic wind moves endlessly across the fields. Storm clouds gather rapidly above the sea, and because the region remains deeply connected to ancient Celtic landscapes and mythology, the atmosphere surrounding the stones already feels mysterious before sunset even arrives. The burial chambers deepen the atmosphere further. Ancient dolmens and passage tombs remain hidden beneath grassy mounds throughout the area. Long stone corridors lead into underground chambers where prehistoric communities buried their dead thousands of years ago. Standing inside them feels strangely unsettling emotionally. Cold air lingers between the stones while faint light enters through narrow openings, aligned carefully toward the sky. Researchers also discovered carvings etched into certain stones, including symbolic patterns and mysterious shapes whose meanings remain uncertain today. Some archaeologists believe the monuments carried ceremonial, astronomical, or spiritual significance connected to ancient beliefs tied to the land and heavens. The alignments deepen the mystery even more. Certain structures appear positioned intentionally according to celestial movement and seasonal sunlight. That detail transformed Lochmariacher into one of Europe's great prehistoric mysteries. Because long before formal astronomy existed, ancient builders were already creating monuments connected to the sky itself. The isolation changes everything emotionally. Unlike crowded modern cities, these giant stones stand quietly beside the Atlantic where wind, rain, and ocean storms shaped the landscape for thousands of years. The silence there feels enormous, especially during early morning when fog moves across the fields and the standing stones slowly emerge through the mist. Then came centuries of change. Civilizations rose across Europe. Kingdoms formed and collapsed. Forests expanded around the monuments while newer generations forgot who originally built them or why. Certain stones fell. Others became buried beneath earth and grass. Yet the giant structures survived where prehistoric builders raised them before written history fully existed. Some visitors later believed hidden chambers still remained buried beneath unexplored mounds, surrounding the site untouched for generations. Others imagined forgotten rituals once took place among the standing stones beneath the stormy skies of ancient Brittany. The megalithic tombs, hidden beneath Korea's misty hills. Across the quiet hills of South Korea, surrounded by forests, rice fields, and drifting mountain fog, there are ancient stone tombs so enormous that they continue to challenge modern understanding of prehistoric engineering. Massive capstones balanced above hidden burial chambers, ancient graves buried beneath grassy hills, and mysterious megalithic monuments older than many famous civilizations of the ancient world. The place is known as Hwasun, and even today, its giant dolmen fields remain some of the most extraordinary prehistoric ruins anywhere in Asia. Because these were not ordinary graves. They were giant stone monuments built to dominate the landscape itself. Hwasun lies within the rolling countryside of southwestern Korea, surrounded by green valleys, rivers, forests, and low mountains stretching beneath soft grey skies. The environment feels ancient immediately. Cold wind moves through tall grass beneath drifting fog. Rain falls quietly across the hills during monsoon season, and scattered across the landscape itself. Gigantic stone tombs rise silently from the earth, exactly where prehistoric builders placed them thousands of years ago. The first sight feels emotionally surreal. Enormous flat stones balanced above smaller supporting rocks, ancient burial chambers hidden beneath grass and soil, and giant capstones so heavy they almost appear impossible for prehistoric people to have moved at all. The atmosphere surrounding Hwasun feels deeply strange, especially during early morning. Mist drifts slowly through the hills while shadows move across the ancient stones beneath the Korean sky. And because the countryside remains so peaceful and isolated, the monuments almost feel disconnected from ordinary time itself. Historians believe many of the dolmens were built during Korea's Bronze Age more than 3,000 years ago. At the time, prehistoric communities across the Korean peninsula were already developing organized societies, agriculture, trade systems, and complex spiritual traditions long before Korea's famous dynasties emerged. The scale deepens the mystery enormously. Some capstones weigh dozens of tons. Ancient builders somehow transported, lifted, and balanced these giant stones without cranes, metal machinery, or advanced engineering tools. That achievement still astonishes archaeologists today. The emotional effect becomes powerful while standing beside them. The tombs feel permanent emotionally, heavy, almost unnatural against the quiet hills surrounding them. Researchers believe the dolmens served as burial monuments for important individuals, including tribal leaders, elites, or spiritual figures within prehistoric communities. Artifacts discovered near certain tombs included pottery, stone weapons, jewellery, and ceremonial objects buried alongside the dead thousands of years ago. The surrounding landscape deepens everything emotionally. Green mountains rise softly beyond the valleys beneath changing skies. Fog moves across the forest during dawn, and because many dolmens remain scattered far from modern cities, silence dominates the ancient hills almost completely. The hidden burial chambers deepen the atmosphere further. Beneath the giant capstones, stone-lined spaces once held human remains and offerings carefully sealed within the earth. Standing near them feels strangely unsettling emotionally, as though the monuments were built not only for burial, but also to display power visibly across the landscape itself. Researchers also discovered ancient stone quarries near sections of the Hwasun dolmen fields, revealing where prehistoric workers may have cut and transported the enormous capstones centuries ago. That discovery deepened the mystery even further, because moving stones of such size across difficult terrain using prehistoric technology would have required extraordinary coordination and labour. The engineering still feels almost impossible emotionally. The Korean peninsula itself deepens the atmosphere surrounding the ruins. Thousands of dolmens once existed across the region, creating one of the largest concentrations of prehistoric megalithic tombs anywhere on Earth. That enormous number reveals how widespread and organised these ancient societies truly became long before written Korean history fully began. Then came centuries of change. Kingdoms rose across Korea. Wars reshaped the peninsula repeatedly. Villages expanded through the valleys and hills, and gradually, many ancient tombs faded quietly into the landscape beneath grass, forest, and earth. Some collapsed beneath erosion. Others remain standing exactly where prehistoric builders raised them thousands of years earlier. Yet the mystery surrounding Hwasun never disappeared, because unlike later civilizations that left written records explaining their beliefs, the people who built the giant stone tombs left only stone behind. No surviving texts, no clear explanations, only enormous monuments hidden among Korea's mist-covered hills. Some visitors later believed undiscovered burial chambers still remained sealed beneath unexplored sections of the countryside untouched for generations. Others imagined forgotten rituals once took place among the giant stones beneath the ancient Korean sky long before recorded history began.